most common form of despair is not being who you are. Take a chance, and you may lose. Take not a chance, and you have lost already. Once you label me, you negate me. Confidence is the present tense of hope. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. It is the duty of the human understanding to understand that there are things which it cannot understand. Do it or don't do it, you will regret both. Which is more difficult, to awaken one who sleeps or to awaken one who, awake, dreams that he is awake? Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought which they seldom use. I found I had less and less to say until finally I became silent and began to listen. I discovered in the silence the voice of God. Once you are born in this world, you're old enough to die. To love another person is to help them love God. Hope is passion for what is possible. If you think you understand, it isn't God. I'm so misunderstood that people misunderstand me, even when I tell them I'm misunderstood. Who am I? How did I come into the world? Why was I not consulted? Life is lived forwards, but understood backwards. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. The deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself. Only the noble of heart are called to difficulty. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. Life is not a problem to be solved, a reality to be experienced. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. The more people who believe something, the more apt it is to be wrong. The person who's right often has to stand alone. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. The thing that cowardice fears most is decision. The best news the world has ever heard came from a graveyard. Christ is risen. To be a woman is something so strange, so confusing, and so complicated that only a woman could put up with it. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. It is not the path which is the difficulty, rather, it is the difficulty which is the path. It is not where we breathe, but where we love that we live. God creates everything out of nothing, and everything which God is to use, he first reduces to nothing. Face the facts of being what you are, for that's what changes what you are. The door to happiness opens outward. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. And this is one of the most crucial definitions for the whole of Christianity, that the opposite of sin is not virtue but faith. If I were a physician, and if I were allowed to prescribe just one remedy for all the ills of the modern world, I would prescribe silence. For even if the word of God were proclaimed in the modern world, how could one hear it with so much noise? Therefore, create silence. Most people are subjective toward themselves and objective toward all others, frightfully objective sometimes. But the task is precisely to be objective toward oneself and subjective toward all others. A man may perform astonishing feats and comprehend a vast amount of knowledge, and yet have no understanding of himself. But suffering directs a man to look within. If it succeeds, then there, within him, is the beginning of his learning. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true.